The graveyard shift at Chicago's Metropolitan Emergency Communications Center was always quietest between 2 and 3 a.m., that dead zone when even the criminals and drunk drivers seemed to take a collective breath. Lisa Monroe had worked the overnight dispatch for 8 years without incident, her workstation nestled between banks of flickering monitors that cast an eerie blue glow across her face. The coffee in her chipped "World's Best Mom" mug, the one her daughter had painted at summer camp 3 years earlier, had long gone cold when the call came in at 2:47 a.m. on February 14, 2014. Valentine's Day. Though in the moment, with adrenaline already tightening her chest at the strange caller ID display, the holiday was the furthest thing from Lisa's mind. The screen flashed "out of area" in pulsating red letters unlike anything she'd seen in her nearly decade of service. When she answered with her standard 911, "What's your emergency?" the line erupted with static so thick it sounded like raw meat being forced through an industrial grinder. Then came the whispering, a voice so ragged and broken it seemed to tear itself from the caller's throat. 41 to 46, 39 N, 87 to 3408. She's in the freezer, please. Each word was punctuated by wet, heaving breaths that made Lisa's stomach turn. Her fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced precision, pulling up the coordinates. The long-abandoned Riverside meatpacking plant on South Ashland Avenue, shuttered since 2003 after a bankruptcy scandal left half its workers without pensions. The place had been a ghost town for over a decade, but the background noise told a different story. The distant squeal of rusted hinges wasn't from ordinary doors. Lisa would later learn it matched the exact pitch of the plant's industrial freezer hatches when pried open. A metallic screech that subsequent audio analysis revealed was identical to the sound of a meat hook being dragged across stainless steel tables. And beneath it all, that wet, rhythmic thumping, like something heavy and soft being struck repeatedly, that made the fine hairs on Lisa's arms stand at attention. "Jill's fingers are in my lunchbox," the man gasped, his voice cracking on the last word. Dispatch recordings show Lisa's professional tone never wavered as she asked, "Sir, are you injured?" But her handwritten notes from that night, later entered into evidence, show she'd scribbled "teeth chattering" in all caps, the pen nearly tearing through the paper. The caller's next words would echo through Chicago PD's halls for years to come. "The night watchman did this. He's been dead since '83, but he's here. I can hear his hook dragging on the pipes." For 19 minutes and 14 seconds, a time frame now memorialized in the center's training manuals as the longest continuous 911 call in its history, Lisa maintained the connection as the unseen caller moved through the plant. The audio recording, preserved on backup servers after someone tried to delete it, paints an oral nightmare. At 2:51 a.m., a tremendous crash reverberates through the line, followed by the unmistakable sound of a heavy industrial door slamming shut. The caller's breathing becomes frantic, his words tumbling over each other. "He's herding me toward Freezer Row. Oh God, the smell. It's not just meat. It's..." The sentence cuts off with a wet gurgle. By 2:58 a.m., a new sound enters the recording, what investigators would later dub the cleaver sounds. 3 measured chops followed by something heavy hitting concrete. The caller whimpers. He's counting them, 1 for each year. Between each set of chops, the faintest metallic squeak, almost musical in its regularity. It wasn't until detectives visited the plant that they recognized the significance. The exact cadence produced by the plant's ancient overhead rail system, when meat hooks moved along the tracks. When police arrived at 3:11 a.m., their body cams captured an industrial graveyard frozen in time. The chain-link fence stood intact, its "no trespassing" signs gleaming under their flashlights. The padlock on the main gate, documented as being replaced just that afternoon, hung undisturbed. Yet thermal imaging showed 3 distinct heat signatures moving through Freezer Row. Impossible given the sub-zero temperatures and the facility's electrical systems being disconnected since the bankruptcy proceedings. Officer Markham's body cam provides the most chilling footage. As they approach Freezer 17, frost blooms across the lens despite the camera's built-in heating element. The door, whose padlock records show hadn't been opened since the health department sealed it in 2003, stands slightly ajar. A single frost-rimed finger is visible in the gap, its nail torn down to the quick. When they breach the freezer, the camera captures walls glistening with decades of frozen condensation, strange symbols, later identified as butcher's yield calculations from the 1980s, scratched into the ice at impossible heights. A 1983 calendar pinned to a bulletin board, February 14th, circled in what forensic analysis confirmed was human blood. The mummified remains of night watchman Carl Jenks still seated at his desk, a meat hook protruding from his left eye socket, his face frozen in a rictus grin. But the true horror lay on the floor beside him. A vintage metal lunchbox with a peeling Star Wars Return of the Jedi decal, its latch crusted with rust. Inside, preserved by the constant cold, 9 severed fingers arranged in a perfect circle on a bed of yellowed newspaper dated February 15th, 1983. 8 matched Jenks's own hands. The 9th, a woman's pinky finger with a distinctive rose tattoo on the knuckle, was later linked through DNA to Gillian Reese, a packaging line worker who vanished after her shift on February 14, 1983. Lisa Monroe resigned the next morning, leaving only a post-it note reading "He's still calling" stuck to her monitor. In the weeks that followed, 3 other operators reported receiving calls from out of area that played back the original 19-minute recording before disconnecting. The plant's security office phone, its line officially disconnected for 11 years, was found off the hook during a follow-up search, its receiver smeared with a substance that DNA analysis matched to Carl Jenks. A janitor discovered Lisa's world's best mom mug in the break room fridge, filled with a dark liquid that testing revealed contained traces of human blood and industrial freezer coolant. To this day, Chicago PD's cold case unit keeps the lunchbox in a dedicated evidence freezer that maintenance workers claim runs too cold, often frosting over even when unplugged. And every February 14th at precisely 2:47 a.m., the phone in the old Riverside security office rings exactly 9 times before falling silent. The caller ID, when checked, always shows "out of area," a designation the phone company insists doesn't exist in their systems. Former dispatch supervisor Maria Gutierrez, who reviewed the original call logs before they were sealed, once told a reporter, "The worst part isn't what we heard. It's what the audio enhancement revealed underneath the static. The sound of a second set of lungs breathing in perfect sync with Lisa's the entire time. Like something was standing right behind her, matching her breath for breath." The plant stands empty now, its freezers silent. But some nights, when the wind blows just right through the broken vents, security guards report hearing the distinct squeak of meat hooks moving along long-removed rails, always in sets of 3, always ending with something heavy hitting the floor. The wind that tore through Danvers State Hospital on the night of December 12, 1978, wasn't just cold. It was alive with malice. It slithered through broken third-floor windows like a spectral intruder, carrying with it the whispers of patients long dead. The heating system, a relic from the asylum's 1878 opening, groaned in protest as the temperature plunged to 19 degrees outside, its rattling pipes creating an eerie percussion beneath the flickering fluorescent lights of Ward 7's nurses' station. Robert Walsh, a 34-year-old orderly with 6 years of uneventful service, signed the medication logbook at 10:58 p.m. with his usual precise handwriting, the final normal act of his life. His co-worker, Nurse Angela Ruiz, would later tell investigators about sharing coffee with Walsh at 11:30 p.m., how they discussed the Patriots' upcoming game and complained about administration's latest cost-cutting measures. She remembered him scratching at a peculiar rash on his wrist, 3 parallel marks that looked almost like fingernail scratches. The first concrete sign something was wrong came at 1:17 a.m., when night supervisor Marjorie Chen heard Walsh engaged in what sounded like a heated debate in the medication room. "I opened the door and there was Robert standing perfectly still in front of the patient files," Chen testified during the investigation, her hands trembling around a styrofoam cup of coffee. His lips were moving, but the voice, Dear God, the voice sounded decades older than his. It kept saying, "They're all still here," while his fingers traced the names on the files. Names of patients who died in that ward going back to the 1940s. Security footage shows Walsh began his 2:30 a.m. medication rounds with eerie precision, pushing the squeaky metal cart down Ward 7's chronic care unit, a hallway many staff called the Corridor of Lost Souls, due to its population of catatonic patients. The infrared cameras captured disturbing details investigators would pore over for years. At 2:47 a.m., Walsh enters room 712 where Martin Llewellyn, a catatonic since 1963, lies motionless as always. But this time, Walsh leans down until his lips nearly touch the patient's ear. The camera catches Llewellyn's eyelids fluttering for the first time in 15 years, as Walsh whispers words the audio system couldn't pick up. By 3:05 a.m., all 17 catatonic patients in Ward 7 are sitting upright with military precision, their emaciated bodies moving in unnatural synchronization as they turn toward the door in perfect unison. The final footage from Ward 7 shows Walsh leading this silent procession toward the basement stairwell at 3:33 a.m. Forensic lip readers would later determine his mouth was forming the words of the hospital's long-abandoned 1947 admission ritual, phrases no living staff member could have known. The last clear image shows patient Sarah Whitcomb, diagnosed with hysterical paralysis in 1951, walking unaided for the first time in 27 years, her bare feet leaving bloody prints that forensic analysis would match to a 1952 blood type, no longer present in any living staff or patients. When day shift arrived at 6:45 a.m., they found 17 beds made with hospital corners so perfect they looked vacuum sealed. Walsh's uniform was discovered in the hydrotherapy room, arranged in a disturbing tableau, his shirt sleeves knotted around the restraint bars, pants legs folded just so, shoes placed precisely where someone lying on the wet floor would have worn them. Most chilling was the medication ledger showing Walsh had administered massive doses of Thorazine, despite pharmacy records proving they'd been out of stock for 3 days. The basement excavation revealed horrors beyond comprehension. Behind a recently bricked wall, workmen discovered 17 rusted wheelchairs arranged in a perfect circle, each containing a single artifact: a patient's slipper with 1940s-era foot impressions still visible in the leather, a tattered hospital gown with the name M. Llewellyn still legible on the collar, medication bottles containing substances that toxicology couldn't identify, but which glowed faintly under black light. The walls behind them were covered in hundreds of overlapping handprints in the distinctive shade of blue used in 1950s-era fingerprint ink, prints that continued up the walls and across the ceiling in impossible configurations. Former staff reported ongoing phenomena after the incident. Nurse Ruiz woke for months to find her bedroom walls covered in the same 3 scratch marks Walsh had on his wrist. The hospital's final night supervisor claimed the ward's lights would flicker on at precisely 3:33 a.m. every night, revealing shadowy figures sitting upright in the now empty beds. And to this day, urban explorers report hearing whispered recitations of patient admission records coming from the abandoned basement, always ending with 17 distinct footsteps ascending the stairs that were demolished in 1985. The official report listed all 18 as missing persons, but those who worked that night know the terrible truth. Robert Walsh didn't disappear during his shift. He completed it, and somewhere in the decaying ruins of Danvers State Hospital, he's still making his rounds, still administering medications that haven't existed for decades, still leading his patients through rituals older than the asylum itself. Some nights, when the wind blows just right through the broken windows, you can hear the squeak of his medication cart moving down corridors that no longer exist, always stopping at precisely 17 rooms before descending into the darkness below. The Chelsea Hotel's night ledger from October 31st, 1982, remains one of New York's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. Its final entry, written in perfect cursive, that still makes forensic experts shudder. The page for room 732 shows a neat 4:30 a.m. checkout signature from night auditor Miguel Fernandez, but the security footage tells a very different story. one that peeled back the veneer of reality to reveal something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface of the iconic hotel. Miguel had been working the Halloween shift alone since 1 a.m., having sent the last bellhop home early due to the holiday's rowdy crowds dispersing earlier than expected. The lobby cameras captured him reading the New York Times at the polished mahogany front desk, his crisp white shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal the tattoo on his left forearm, a nautical star from his merchant marine days that would later become a focal point of the investigation. Every 15 minutes, like clockwork, he'd sip from a chipped coffee mug bearing the hotel's logo, the steam curling around his face in the chilly lobby air. At precisely 3:17 a.m., a time that would later appear with disturbing frequency in the case files, the elevator opened empty on the 7th floor. The interior camera revealed claw marks running from floor to ceiling in parallel grooves approximately 4 inches apart, the wood beneath the torn wallpaper showing strange blackened streaks that forensic teams would later compare to electrical burns or possibly chemical corrosion. What the camera didn't show was any person or object that could have made these marks, just the doors sliding open to reveal an empty hallway, then closing again with an unusually slow, almost reluctant motion. 23 minutes later at 3:40 a.m., Miguel made his final log entry with the same meticulous penmanship he'd used for all 12 years of his employment. Guest in 732 requesting extra towels. Will deliver. The footage shows him loading a brass housekeeping cart with stacks of fresh linens, humming along to the faint jazz still playing from the lobby speakers. He never noticed, or chose to ignore, the shadowy figure now standing behind the front desk, its elongated limbs perfectly mirroring Miguel's movements with a slight delay, like a distorted echo given physical form. The entity's head tilted at the exact moment Miguel paused to stretch his neck, its inky black silhouette somehow appearing both flat and impossibly deep, as if staring into a void that stared hungrily back. By 4:15 a.m., the situation had deteriorated beyond all rational explanation. 3 additional shadows had materialized from the darkened corners of the lobby, their elongated fingers twitching in unison as they flanked Miguel near the elevator bank. The temperature logs show the lobby plunged from 68 degrees to a bone-chilling 42 degrees in under 53 seconds. Frost blooming across the brass mail slots and crystal chandeliers in intricate fractal patterns that several physicists later admitted resembled complex mathematical equations for dimensional breaches. Miguel's breath came in visible white puffs as he stood frozen before the elevators, his face a mask of primal terror in the green glow of the security monitors, eyes wide enough to show the whites all around, lips pulled back from teeth in a grimace that wasn't quite a scream. The final footage shows the elevator doors opening at 4:27 a.m. to reveal an interior, lit by an impossible crimson light source that cast no shadows. The walls, which had been pristine mahogany paneling moments before, now appeared stripped to bare, splintered studs as if aged decades in seconds. Deep gouges ran horizontally across the back wall at roughly chest height for an average man, the wood fibers twisted outward, as if something had been clinging desperately to escape. Most disturbing of all was the floor, covered in a thin layer of blackened water that lapped at the threshold like a hungry tide, though the building's plumbing schematics showed no water lines running through that elevator shaft. Miguel's last act was to straighten his tie with trembling fingers before stepping inside, just as all 4 shadow figures lunged forward in perfect synchronization, their elongated limbs stretching far beyond human proportions. The elevator doors closed with a finality that echoed through the empty lobby, leaving behind only the housekeeping cart, with its neatly folded towels now soaked through with that same blackened water, the Chelsea Hotel logo bleeding from the fabric in inky rivulets. When police forced open room 732 at dawn, they found Miguel's uniform laid out with military precision on the bed. Shirt buttoned to the top, jacket smoothed without a single wrinkle, polished shoes aligned precisely beneath. The mirror above the dresser had shattered outward, its shards forming a disturbing pattern on the carpet that several officers described as like something had exploded from within the glass. The nightstand phone was off the hook, its receiver emitting not a dial tone, but a chorus of whispering voices counting backward from 7 in at least a dozen different languages. a recording that continued uninterrupted for 14 hours until the phone inexplicably crumbled into rusted fragments. The hotel closed the 7th floor permanently in 1984, after multiple housekeepers reported finding wet towels arranged in strange geometric patterns, always in groups of 4, always smelling of salt water, and something metallic that made their fillings ache. Maintenance workers refused to service the floor after tools would go missing, only to be found days later in the elevator shaft, their surfaces pitted with corrosion as if submerged in seawater for decades. To this day, night workers in adjacent buildings report seeing shadows moving behind the Chelsea's 7th floor windows at exactly 3:17 a.m. Their spindly fingers pressed against the glass in what looks like a counting motion, their elongated forms casting no reflections in the moonlit windows. The original night ledger remains locked in an NYPD evidence vault, its pages occasionally found turned to room 732's entry, no matter how many times investigators reseal it. The ink on Miguel's final signature growing noticeably darker each year, as if whatever took him that Halloween night is still patiently adding layers to its masterpiece. Former hotel manager Arthur Caldwell, who reviewed the security footage before it was seized as evidence, once told reporters, "The shadows weren't attacking him, they were hurting him. That elevator didn't just open, it was summoned. And whatever's on the other side of those doors, it's been waiting a long, long time for someone exactly like Miguel to finally check out." The Chelsea still stands on 23rd Street, its Art Deco facade hiding secrets in every rust-pitted crevice. Some nights, when the wind blows just right through its aging ventilation shafts, long-term residents claim to hear the distinct sound of a housekeeping cart rolling down the 7th floor hallway, its wheels squeaking in 4 perfect intervals, always stopping outside room 732 before the faintest splash of black water echoes through the pipes.